Hey folks, MasakoX here. On this channel, it's quite obvious that Raditz is very much the main bastion of it. Raditz has been the person that we have put on a pedestal, unashamedly so, without so much as a flicker of doubt in our minds. This Saiyan is the pinnacle of the what if movement, providing new ideas and possibilities for the Dragon Ball story for characters that may not have had the chance to get their own dues or to have their own time in the spotlight that they should have rightly deserved. In this version of Raditz's redemption, we sort of made it a little more nuanced. We've swapped him with Goku, and he got to go to Earth first instead of Kakarot. But that all would come to a head in a moment of honesty, which turned into an absolutely dire time for the Radish. Almost as dark as when Bulma bit it. In the last part, Bulma had been revived, and the couple were getting caught up with one another in West City, when Launch decided to pay a visit, recognizing Raditz from when she was rescued by him during a robbery. Now this initial encounter sowed suspicion in Bulma's head, thinking there was something else going on. But soon enough, the sneezing quirk made itself apparent, and Blonde Launch, the goon who had held the bank up, was revealed, and Raditz quickly brought justice down upon her, assuaging Bulma's worries. And in a fit of panic, Raditz proved to Bulma that he did love her so much that he proposed to her there and then, which the Capture Corp lass took instantly with astonishment and naturally said yes. Things were looking up, you could say. King Piccolo had been contained and locked away forever. Earth was now rid of any potential menace. Frieza had no idea where he and Kakarot were, and all they had to do now was just train with Kami for a few years, look forward to the next tournament, and then true peace would be theirs seemingly forever. There was nobody else that could stand against them. Well, there was one thing: the truth. During their time in the Room of Spirit and Time, in the final days of their training up on the lookout, Raditz had felt secure enough to finally tell his brother the real reason why he had been left behind. It had nothing to do with Frieza, but the reaction that he got was nothing what he expected. Kakarot walked out, silently, away from his brother. And in that sad moment, Raditz truly unlocked Super Saiyan, something that he had been looking for. But that was small consolation when you lose your brother for it. The stage was set now, at that tournament, for the brothers to meet face to face one more time and duke it out the Saiyan way. Let's resume. We are at the final of the 23rd Tenkai Chiburukai. The crowd have seen Kakarot and Raditz progress through the contest, and recalled the previous encounter in the 22nd, where they also met in the final. On that occasion, Raditz had come out on top, and obviously, he was here to defend his title. But for the crowd, the brothers were bringing home the glory and fascination for their family once again. Or were they? The tournament announcer mentioned throughout his hyping up of the match prior to now that the air this time felt different. "I don't know what's been said," he would regale the audience, "but the tension between them is so thick, you can cut it with the sharpest of knives. Will this spill over into the fight, ladies and gentlemen?" The crowd were very much geared for an explosive encounter. And that's what they would get, also tinged with other things. At first, Raditz tried to reason with his brother, this being the only time he had gotten even remotely close to him. "Kakarot, please, don't take your anger toward me out on these people. Don't go all out. You know what we can do. Whatever hate you have in your heart, direct it at me alone." Kakarot still had said nothing. He hadn't uttered so much as a syllable in his brother's direction since he had found out about his years of pain at the hands of Frieza, treated like some kind of pet when it could have been avoided, whilst his brother was gallivanting here on Earth with a girl on his arm. Raditz sighed at the silence. "I brought this on myself." Whilst this was going on, Bulma was trying her best to figure out how to resolve this brotherly spat on her end. She decided to go over to Chi-Chi, who didn't blank her per se, but she wasn't exactly welcoming to her either, having heard Kakarot's side of the story. "What do you want? Trying to big up your boyfriend?" "Fiancé, actually," said Bulma with a stern tone. And for a brief second, Chi-Chi flickered with innate surprise and like, but she controlled herself. Your mind games won't work on me. Now tell me why you're here or head back to the bleachers. Look, you don't get it, Bulma said. Raditz has been stewing over his mistake ever since we met. Possibly long before then. He knows what he did was wrong, and he's been trying to make up for it since. He's long accepted that what he did was terrible. Not once has he said otherwise. That's not what Kakarot told me. He said that Raditz was being a coward, that he actively chose to leave his brother behind, and not once did he try to get back in contact. He doesn't deny that. He was a coward. He's not saying he wasn't. Don't you get it? Once he knew he could have helped, he used the Dragon Balls to protect Kakarot from harm. It's the best he could have done. Isn't that proof enough? Chi-Chi looked a little moved by that, but then countered. He didn't want that, you know. Want what? That shield thing. It was a hindrance. He hadn't earned this power. It was some kind of half-hearted compensation. Raditz didn't wish for that out of love, clearly. It was reactionary. To try and place a band-aid over an already gaping wound that he had brought upon his brother that divides them. Now and forever, Bulma was getting nowhere here. But back in the ring, new wounds were forming. The battle started off slow, the pair sizing each other up. The crowd were getting a little bored by this, in fact. What were they doing? Some boos were starting to emanate from amongst the stands. They had been promised the battle of the century all the time that they were here. Not for some light shoving or something they could have seen earlier on in the contest or down the fighting pits. Fight already! Get on with it! Shouted one of the irate members of the crowd. Kakarot was getting sick of this. What were they doing here? Some kind of entertainment? The difference is being boiled down to that? A spectacle? He shouted to the crowd. You wanna fight? He then lit up a ki blast and aimed it at Raditz. Then here! He fired it, and Raditz easily deflected it, and Raditz scowled whilst the audience cheered. Your fight is with me! Keep your frustrations focused on myself, no one else! Shut up! Said Kakarot. Oh, hey, he said something toward him. Not exactly saying a nice thing to him, but something. And the pair rushed each other and began their close-quarter flurry of blows, lighting up the crowd even more. The exchanges were so fast, not even the high-speed cameras could keep up with them. It was all a blur, but the impacts could be felt reverberating throughout the stadium, even if they couldn't fully see it, punctured occasionally with the momentary break as one or the other dodged an attack. Raditz knew he had the upper hand though. He could break out Super Saiyan and end this right now, take the win from Kakarot again. But why? Why would he do that? Take away yet another thing from his brother? It would be unfair and push them apart even more. After minutes of this stalemate, Kakarot broke up the fight after discovering something amidst their tussle. Under slightly laboured breath, he exclaimed, You're holding back. I know it. You're not giving me your all. You promised you would. But why am I surprised? Once a liar. If I were to show you what I discovered, it could destroy everything around here. I don't know its true potential. I haven't mastered it yet. I choose not to use it for the sake of others. Earth is my home, brother, and I will not risk its safety just for the sake of a petty squabble that I have tried my damnedest to rectify since I got here. Yet you will not listen. Kakarot was getting tired of the deception and the withholding of information. He spotted Bulma talking to Chi-Chi in the stands and scoffed. Getting Bulma to pick you up? Pathetic. Chi-Chi is smarter than that. Raditz was tired of this, but he powered up to his full Super Saiyan state and smacked Kakarot out of the ring. But Kakarot didn't land on the grass, to the crowd's shock. He was floating in midair. But Raditz wasn't surprised though. He knew Kakarot would figure this out eventually, fully. Enough, brother. If you can beat me, like this, no gimmicks, I will tell you, and I will share it with you. Even if you choose to never speak to me again after. Kakarot silently accepted, as he hovered back in and the fight resumed. Raditz was constantly thinking of a way to make it up to Kakarot, but he was struggling to do so. The jerk of a brother had a point. He had let him down, left him behind. It seemed that no matter how much Raditz tried to accept the blame, the cold hard fact remained that it had happened, and that Kakarot could have avoided it. It was as clear as day. There was something in the way. Raditz couldn't go back in time to fix that. I mean, another person could, but not him. Eventually, it was getting to the point where Raditz and Kakarot were starting to tire. The arena was completely wrecked, the stone slabs utterly torn apart and in pieces. But it was still in a structure. Someone could fall out. Kakarot kept his word and ensured that there would be no more collateral damage. Raditz then looked at the stands, to Bulma, and something twigged. It hit him. There was happiness coming his way soon enough. It put things in perspective. What was he doing here, Raditz thought. He was butting heads with an unstoppable force at the moment who was being belligerent. It was pointless getting through to him right now. No matter what Raditz had done or said, there was no shifting the sentiment. In that moment, Raditz stopped fighting and held his hand out to Kakarot to call time. Kakarot was puzzled. What? What are you doing? You win. I give up. What? Said the younger of the two. And with that, Raditz flew away from Kakarot and toward his fiancée in the stands. Let's go, Bulma. We have our lives ahead of us. Bulma was blown away. This was a bittersweet gesture. She took his hand and he held her in his arms. He flew back down to Kakarot, saying one more thing. There is an invitation for you. Not that you'll want it, but it's there. See you, brother. The pair flew away, with Kakarot shouting expletives as his elder brother grew smaller and smaller before disappearing from view. Running away again! Typical of you! This isn't over! The tournament announcer was right. There had been something bad going down. But there was a winner to crown, and amongst the rubble of the ring, he carefully made his way over to Kakarot and declared him the winner. But the Saiyan pulled his arm away from the announcer, not wanting his plaudits. In the crowd, the mood was mixed. What had happened? There was a wedding? Word got around very quickly about that. The daughter of the owner of Capsule Corp marrying a martial arts champion? My. This broke the anxious atmosphere at the moment somewhat, whilst up above, Kami sighed with sorrow. You did your best, Raditz. This is clearly going to take some time. Indeed, this would. An empty pair of chairs for him and Chi-Chi stuck out like sore thumbs as Bulma and Raditz made their bows and tried to hide their sadness of them not being there from the others. Of course, Bulma was incredibly moved at Raditz's maturity about this. For a Saiyan to forego a fight like that, to not use his newfound power, and put her above all else, was extremely touching. This was a big deal, but it couldn't quite hide the real fact that a wedge had been formed between the brothers. Raditz had done all he could to persuade Kakarot that he was sorry, and accepted responsibility that they could try and move on from this. But if Kakarot didn't want to hear anything more about it, not much else could be done. Raditz thought the same. He had left the ball in Kakarot's court, and all he could do now was to live out his life as best he can until Kakarot was ready to talk, with Bulma by his side. He knew he was the stronger of the two, that he could keep Kakarot in check should he turn evil or something, or try something rash, but he hoped it would never come to that. This legendary Super Saiyan power was a curse in his eyes. He had gotten this power through the pain and misery of losing his brother. It was tainted, despite being legendary. As for Kakarot, he too chose to get married to Chi-Chi, the only constant in his life right now. Their wedding was far more down to earth than Raditz and Bulma's. But during the ceremony, as they were making their vows, Kakarot could swear that he could see Raditz in the distance. He wanted to go over there and see for himself properly and tell him to get lost. But when he went to look again, Raditz had gone. He turned back to his now wife and sighed. He didn't want to be enemies with his brother, but he couldn't get over the reality that he had been left to rot, even if this had been a long time ago and he was happy now. He didn't know what could fix this, or if it could even be fixed. But just in case it did come to blows, the pair of them kept training, like it were a Cold War type of affair, awaiting the time should this come to its inevitable Saiyan conclusion, via combat. In that ring earlier, it had been close. Kakarot had caught up massively in the time since they started training with Kami, post King Piccolo. Raditz, recognizing his brother's true potential, could have been greater than his. He had a head start, and that head start was shrinking. He also noticed that the wish he had given his brother years ago had faded away. Possibly due to diminishing returns perhaps, maybe some other explanation. He couldn't be sure, but he kept that at the back of his mind. Both brothers sired children. Kakarot and Chi-Chi had a son named Kakarot. What name is this, Masako? Well, it's a mix of Kakarot, carrot, and Chi-Chi's, milk. You can make carrot cake with those ingredients, or Kiarato keiki, so, Kiaro. We can't have Gohan here since Kakarot never had close ties to Grandpa Gohan. And Raditz and Bulma, they had Bulma, since Bulma got to name her. This Bulma, though, was a lot more eccentric than the original Bulma as she grew up. She would always get into mischief whilst also wielding a rather notable amount of power and smarts. Bulma wasn't sure about getting a child involved in the brotherly spat or in combat martial arts, but she actively showed interest in Raditz's training Bulma whenever he conducted it, so it was sort of inevitable. With the power of Capsule Corp resources too, Raditz requested his wife build him a chamber, which could closely replicate Saiyan gravity or other gravity amounts. I recalled it worked in the time chamber. The further we went away from the main base, the stronger gravity got. Might be useful. Bulma again was nervous about indulging Raditz's desire to get stronger for such somber purposes, but she chose to cope with this by seeing this instead as a challenge of her own ability. Raditz used his time in there to get up to grips with the Super Saiyan power, in secret. He couldn't let anyone know about this transformation, not even Bulma, but Kakarot could feel it. He could sense this difference in power, even on the other side of the world. He didn't know what it looked like, but it was there. Years would pass and the sibling impasse remained in place. Neither of them had seen the other. Raditz had hoped Kakarot would choose to break the deadlock, but in reality, he knew that that would be a tall order. Bulma would ask about her uncle many times, and Raditz would never talk him down, never say anything bad. He's a very powerful and amiable younger brother, darling. Spirited and quick thinking. Then how come he's never visited, Papa? This would choke Raditz every single time she would ask this. He couldn't bring himself to say the reason, the truth. Ironic. So I bet you're asking, when does another big bad come down to play? Well, you see, since Raditz is already here, the impetus for Dragon Ball Z coming knocking on Earth's door, it's not here. Frieza has no knowledge of Raditz's existence or Kakarot's continued existence, assuming him lost. And as for Vegeta, well, that might come about or it might not. Like I said before, he didn't really care much about Kakarot, and since he found out that he was dead, or seemingly dead, he had long since put him out of his mind, and continued on his merry way, doing Frieza's bidding, or just going around the galaxy just because, for his own personal amusement. For now though, there is a precarious peace whilst the brothers await the others' next move. But that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now. If you like the story where Raditz was a better person, you can also check out this one, where Raditz is a do-gooder in Gine's timeline where she went with Goku to Earth and grew up with him. And as always, I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!